Why, hello there, YouTube. Welcome back for devlog number 3. So, it's been a good week. I continued going on with the combat changes I was making last week. That's really coming into its own, which I'm really thrilled about. And I have a new mechanic to show you all. So, for those of you who thought this was just a solo developed 3D dual joystick shooter that takes place in a convenience store, were you ever wrong? There's so much nuance. So let's check it all out and let's see what I've been up to for the last week of my life. I thought it would make sense to start this week's video with combat again, continuing from what I got done last week and looking at what I wanted to change still. In last week's video, if you'll remember, I did lots of work on the impact and the feel of the game. I also set up the enemies so that they can collide with each other, and I made some other changes. This week I want to continue along with those, addressing some bugs I've encountered. Right there you just saw one. I'm actually missing a node in my pathfinding right in that bottom left corner. I'll come around here again in the video so the enemies don't think that they can reach me from that side, so they take the long route around. So that was a bug I found. I also wanted to do some more improvements. So last week I worked on randomizing. I want to continue on. I wanted to add more randomness to the enemies. There it is again. I wanted to improve some of their melee animations, and I wanted to start thinking about damage and kind of how much damage, how many bullets should it take to kill an enemy, how fast should they move, that kind of stuff. So adjusting the pathfinding with my UI is pretty straightforward. I can bring that up with the in-game editor. You'll notice my mouse picking has a bug in it. I'm trying to click on those nodes right now and I'm a little bit off. Somewhere in there I'm scaling things incorrectly. But you can see between these two nodes there's no connection, there's no path, and that's why the enemies don't think they can reach me there. So with the UI I can just select the two nodes, I hit the M key, and it bridges them. And here's the gameplay with that now fixed. I've also added in some other adjustments. Last week I mentioned at the end I wanted to generate some random offsets for the nodes. So now every time the enemy goes to go to the next node on its path, I generate a random offset, so a random X and a random Y value to add to that node position so that not every enemy is just walking to the exact same points. There's a little bit of randomness there, which is nice. I've also added in a turning radius, so when the enemies reach a node before, they would immediately snap to the next node they were looking at. This turning radius kind of just smooths it out a little bit. It makes it so they can't turn that quickly. There's a limit. The next thing I started to work on was the enemy hitboxes and their attack logic. I tightened up the hitboxes on the enemies last week because when I was generating the particles, I wanted it to look like the blood was coming from them. Before, the hitboxes were a bit large, so it almost looked like the blood was emitting directly in front of them. Here you can see the blue squares here are the hitboxes, the circles around each enemy. And now you can see when they melee, this is the attack hitbox that gets generated, and it's quite clearly off. It's not in time with the animation. And you also might even notice that as you start to run away, the attack hitbox still exists, which is kind of a bug. You shouldn't be able to get hit when the enemy isn't attacking anymore. So to fix this attack logic, I tried a couple different things, but I ultimately decided to try and really line it up with the animation. So this is in Blender, this is where I animated the demon here. You can see I have these frames of animation, and so I picked the frames where I want the hitboxes to begin. So here, up at the top, this is when I wanted that collider to start, or that kind of circle that's going to detect when we hit the player. And then here is where I want it to end. And so I use this for timing so that I can make sure even if I adjust the frame rate or the playback speed of the enemy's animations, like I talked about last week with the randomness, I'll still be linked up. And this is the result. It's a lot better timed. You'll also notice I fixed that bug where if you run away and the enemy is no longer animating the attack, the hitbox disappears. I guess really I was kind of going back and forth on this. I thought about having them play through the animation, but then I worried that that might take the challenge out of the game. You might be able to kind of move forward, have the enemy go to attack you, and then quickly roll out of the way, and they would be stuck in their animation. But overall, I was pretty happy with this change. The other adjustment I made was tightening up that hitbox. I have a limit of how tight the enemy will get to you, so here I've increased it again. This is what it was before, so now I changed that so they get a little bit closer to you. I think overall it would probably be a lot cleaner if I made it so my code was based off of the actual bones in the animation, but at this point when I went to implement this melee, this was a couple years ago, I didn't have the code in place that I could just grab the positions of bones, but I do now. This is where I'm at the end of the week. I'm honestly quite pleased with this. I've upped the damage on the bullets, so 4 bullets will kill an enemy, and I think that's a pretty good balance. I like now that you're trying to run away from these enemies. I find that like you don't have time to focus on all of the things I've been worrying about these last 2 videos because you have these enemies coming at you. And with the damage up on the gun, I find it's pretty good you can get cornered if you're not thinking ahead, but also you can kind of shoot your way out without taking too much damage. For the time being, I'm really happy with this. I think I'll probably keep going back to the drawing board and keep this on the side, thinking about randomizing and how punishing the game should be, but this is a pretty fun point to leave it off at, I think. This brings us to the other topic I wanted to work on this week, and that's the incremental mechanic in my game. If you don't know, an incremental game or an idle game or a clicker game, there's lots of different names for it. It's a game where you earn currency over time. And as you get more currency, you can buy upgrades that let you get currency faster. It's really all about just the numbers going up. I've grabbed some video of some favorite ones of mine online, but I have a mechanic in my game that centers around this. I really love playing these games, and as I took so many years to work on mine, I kind of really fell in love with this idea of I'm the only person working on this game, I should make this as much a representation of me as possible, so I like this mechanic, I should put this in my game. Even in games where it's not the center focus, I think it can be really awesome. Like some Assassin's Creed games have done stuff with this where you play through the normal gameplay, and then every once in a while you check in and you've earned a bunch of currency and you can buy some upgrades. I just find it hooks me in even longer of you play the normal gameplay and enjoy it, and you're like, oh, I just got these upgrades, let me play a little bit longer to make it worthwhile. So for my game, I figured I would have an incremental system or an idle system where you generate currency, and then using that currency, it'll feed into the upgrade system. Next week's video, I'm going to talk about the upgrade system, which is really fun and exciting, so I don't want to kind of steal that topic for this one. So I had this idea that I was going to do an idle game. I knew in my store I wanted to have like this physicality, right? And so initially I figured like a Tamagotchi is like the perfect thing. I was like, I'll make a Tamagotchi and that'll be what you use for this idle game. And then as I started working on it and started making the screen and everything, I was like, what am I doing? I gotta make a Game Boy knockoff. So this is like the knockoff Game Boy. I've called it a Game Touring Plus Plus. The model I made is right here. And then as you upgrade the Game Boy, you'll get attachments, and it's just like in the height of the Game Boy days, people made all these ridiculous peripherals, and so with those peripherals, you'll be able to generate currency faster. As part of the whole idle thing, I needed an action to be performed on the Game Boy over and over again, so I made this animation, this very kind of cheap, blocky, low-res, grayscale animation of this guy doing a kickflip. Once again, I like skateboarding. Can I skateboard? Not really, but I think it's cool, and so I was like, this will be a cool thing to have for my idle game. And this is the initial implementation of this. This is from about 3 years ago. I scripted this cool kind of first time grabbing the Game Boy, you can flip it around and take a look at it. And then you turn it on, and it starts. I had to implement the ability to adjust the contrast, because I remember getting my first Game Boy, not a color, a pre-color, and taking it home and going to play it and putting batteries in it, and the screen was black, and then realizing, oh, you have to adjust the contrast, it was just turned up. This was my idea for an upgrade menu at first. I was going full in on nostalgia, so I thought, why not have like a ripped out page of like a Sears catalog? That was just a placeholder image, but my idea was I would place all my models in Blender like on a blanketed scene if you've ever seen like a Christmas Sears catalog, and you'd be able to select from them. So I purchased a grip here, and now there's this button presser which will press the button for you. This is usually a big part of idle games. At the beginning you have to press the button yourself, and then you reach a point where you get an upgrade that'll do it for you. Obviously the animation's playing pretty quick here. Next you buy this battery pack, just the AA that plugs in. You can see in the top right corner the currency has begun to accumulate. None of this is like tuned or anything. This was really just a show that it all worked. There's the car battery upgrade you can buy. Now a heatsink. I just thought this was like great. I came up with this idea one month and just spent the month fleshing this out. I thought this was so fun. And then a fan you can put on the heatsink. I was really stoked with this initial prototype, but eventually I figured I needed to make some changes. The first thing was I didn't like that you could access it anywhere. I kept getting weird glitches where you would look at it and you would be right next to a shelf. And also like having the car battery on the ground seemed a little bit silly. And then the upgrade menu I liked, but I figured why not like put this in the store? So I made a cabinet here. It's got like a plush, I don't have a good texture on it right now, but it's got like a plush cushion that everything sits on. And it's got the like Walmart screen glass with the lock so you can go and select stuff. Then I chose to make a kiosk. It's in the bottom right corner of the store where you would go and interact with the Game Boy. It's kind of like one of those McDonald's kiosks where you could play games or play demos of them. All of this was a big part of today's work. I had all these models obviously, and I had that cabinet already set up, but placing them in the store, setting up the logic around the sliding glass and everything. And then here, the turn on sequence, I ended up having quite a bit of trouble with this because the Game Boy is rotated at a 45 degree, then trying to rotate that on top of it. I knew 3D rotations would be challenging with my game, but I had no idea it would cause me so much trouble. I had to write a lot of code around this to be able to rotate from the orientation it's already at. Got the kickflip running pretty slow here, just so there's kind of some runway, so as you get upgrades it'll go faster. You can see in the bottom left there, you can now have a currency. I added in a particle with a +1 to pop out. This whole game touring system is going to feed into the upgrade system, so you'll use these currencies in the bottom left corner to buy upgrades for your player. I think it's going to be an interesting challenge when it comes to tuning all of this. I want it so you get all of the game touring upgrades throughout the course of the game, but making it so you don't get all of them too soon or too slowly is kind of an interesting challenge. Most idle games just use like kind of a math equation, but here I'm going to want to tune it so once I finish the game and figure out the length, you get stuff at a good clip. All right, that'll do us for another week. I'm pretty happy with where everything's going. The combat's coming together. That's been a little bit of a stress for me. The programming was all there, but I wasn't really sure if it would come together in terms of the fun. It's becoming a lot more engaging, which makes me really happy. Really happy with the game touring. It looks great. I love the cabinet in the store, and just overall how the game's coming together. So thanks for watching for this week. If you're interested in any of the idle games in the background, I'll include links in the description. Beware, they will suck up all your time. But otherwise, I'll see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.